Hi, my name is Abraham, and I'm your big brother in recovery, coming back to you with another, hopefully educational video uh, based on recovery. If this is your first time on the channel, by all means, please leave a comment, uh, press the like button, and hopefully you'll subscribe on the conclusion of the content of the video, because we attempt to remove all of our personal opinions from all of these teachings and try to make the premise of everything that we talk about specifically from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, because nobody's interested in my opinion on anything, right? So guess what I would prefer not to do? Give my opinion, but I would like to do is share a word from our sponsors, which are the more than 100 men and women who wrote this book. As always, I like to get right into it. Many of you are reaching out to me, letting me know that the content that we are delivering to you has depth and weight. And basically because people are looking primarily for one thing. And what they're looking for is page 17, the last paragraph. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree, and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. So what are people looking for? People are looking for a solution, because there are so many people talking about the problem until they evade the solution, and there is a solution. That's why there's a chapter that we just read from called There Is a Solution. And if you look at some of the past videos, you'll see we talk about that. But this is AA's message of hope. So if I'm not rendering hope to the newcomer and those of you who are watching me, you don't need to come back to this channel, because guess what? When we help others, we help ourselves. So that brings me to what I want to talk to you about today. This is episode 4, I suppose, of Don't Believe the Hype, right? And I received a email this week. And the email was from a gentleman who left me his number. I contacted him, and he resided in Toledo, Ohio. For the sake of anonymity, I won't give you his name, because anonymity is the spiritual foundation upon which we live. But he reached out to me, and he told me he doesn't know how he found me, but he said it just wound up on his phone. So thank you out there for sharing these videos with your friends in recovery. He said to me that he started watching them, but prior to that, he introduced himself to me, and he was very civil. He said that he was 73 years old, had been clean and sober for 51 years, and was a grand sponsor. And not only that, held every position in AA. And not only that, he sponsored sponsors, and his sponsors had sponsees. And I hope I'm not giving out too much information. He has a Wanderers group that he's a part of that he founded. So I was impressed. So he began to talk to me, and he said, you know, I was really listening to your videos. And he said, I must tell you, I was intrigued. So obviously, I thanked him. And so we got down to what was he inquisitive about? What was his question? And he said, I saw one of your videos, and I wanted to get your take on something. And I said, okay, what was it? He said, you said that we are not supposed to call ourselves addicts no longer, or alcoholics no more, right? Because we have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I said, yeah, that's true, even though the big book does tell us on page 33 in the first paragraph, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. The big book does say that, right? But then again, I proceeded to also find out, told him to pull out his book, and he did. And so I asked him to go to page 85. Let's look at page 85. And I'd like to draw your attention to the first paragraph. It is not easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels, for we're headed for trouble if we do. But alcohol is a subtle foe, meaning it's cunning, baffling, and powerful. It's deceptive, right? This is what I want to get to. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. I took him there, and he was a little confused. He said, well, what does that have to do with not being an alcoholic? Because it says we're not cured. I said, okay. We just read on the bottom of page 84 the promises, right? 84 and 85. And this is the 10th step promises, and this is the description of a recovered alcoholic. And if you notice, there are 10, if you look at the bottom of the page and it goes to the top of page 85, those are the step 10 principles, promises. Simply because the first 9 steps help you recover, 10, 11, and 12 keep you recovered. So that's where I'm going with this daily reprieve. So I begin to share with him, if I stay fit or in fit spiritual condition, and what that means is by taking a daily inventory, step 10, the rewards of taking that daily inventory is a daily reprieve, like they just said. And your Big Book Dictionary says a pardon, relief, or how about this word? Grace. Grace, unmerited favor. Favor from who? Favor from God. Because one day of favor is worth more than 1,000 years of labor, because you can't work for what God wants to give you. So with that being said, I also proceeded to ask him a question, because he was what they call a big book mocker, M-O-C-K-E-R. And if you know anything about a mocker, and my thumbs up to you, they don't play around. They are intense students of the big book. So I was privileged and privy to talk to him, to learn from him. But they believe the first 103 pages of the book, they really into the first 103 pages. Everything else they considered as lost chapters. They are seriously all the way up to working with others. They into that. Everything else, they don't even deal with the first 164, most that I know. So, as I was saying, I asked him a question, and I'm gonna freak you guys out when I tell you this. I asked him, did he have a higher power, his understanding? And without hesitation, he said, absolutely. I said, okay. I said, does your higher power possess all power? Because our literature says there's one with all power, may you find him now. Half measures avail as none. He said, absolutely. I said, all right. Well, let's take a look at a few things. And what I began to show him, I'm going to tell you what he told me afterwards, which really shocked me in a positive way. I was humbled by it. I proceeded to ask him, do you believe that the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous is our basic text? He said, yes. I said, because guess what? It's on the cover jacket, the dust jacket of our book. It says this is the 4th edition of the Big Book, the basic text or basic textbook for our fellowship, all right, for Alcoholics Anonymous. Then I asked him, do you believe this book is our basic text for our society? He said, yes, obviously, Roman numeral page XI, you can look at it. It tells us that it is our basic text for our society, so we're supposed to study and read it. Remember, he's already a mocker. He knows this, but I don't know what he knows, so I'm trying to find out what he knows, because the more I learn, the less I find out I know. So he agreed with everything I said. This is where I got him. So I said, so you believe everything that's in this book? He said, absolutely, unequivocally, I do. I said, okay. I said, look, the word disease is only in the first 164 pages of the big book one time, but it's in the stories a few times. The word cured is in our big book in the first 164 pages. Remember, they don't go past 103. It's in the first 164 pages, one time on page 85, first paragraph. We are not cured. So I begin to lay something out for him, which is going to be controversial for you, based on once an addict, always, once an alcoholic, always, or once an addict. And I'll address that, right? Because the Narcotics Anonymous book says that once an addict is not always an addict. And I'll show you what they say, right? As a matter of fact, I'll show it to you now. In the page prior to the introduction page in the Narcotics Anonymous book, it says we cannot change the nature of addiction. The addict or addiction. We can help to change the old lie. What's the old lie? Once an addict, always an addict. Wow, that's the old lie? By striving to make recovery more available. God help us to remember this difference. Now notice what the Narcotics Anonymous book says right here on your dust jacket. Many books have been written about the nature of addiction, but this book primarily concerns itself with the nature of recovery. If you're an addict and have found this book, please give yourself a chance or a break and read it. So that tells me a lot of people aren't reading the books, because if you look at the introduction, the second paragraph of Narcotics Anonymous, they also say it's an incurable disease, but they also say that they follow a program adapted from Alcoholics Anonymous. Just read the introduction. So everything the people in Narcotics Anonymous know, they borrowed it from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now let me get back to what I was saying. So I proceeded to show him that the word cured is in this book 7 more times. And he was like, no way. Because, he hadn't went past 103rd. It was almost blasphemy for me to say that. So I proceeded to take him, like I'm going to take you, on a journey. And I want you to watch where I'm going, right? Because it's going to be controversial. Now, a person should not be considered or naive because they state that the big book declares that we're not cured of alcoholism in this page, right? That statement only occurs once in the part of the book, but watch this. It occurs 7 more times in the back of the book, right? Now, let's look at it. I like to start with, where do I want to start? Let's look at page 118. Let's look at page 118. Let's see what it says. Now notice this. This is going to be interesting. 118 to the wives. I want you to look at 1, 2, 3, the 4th paragraph on 118. After feeling we are very likely to entertain is one of resentments that love and loyalty could not cure. Talking about his addiction. Watch this. Our husband's alcoholism. What couldn't cure it? Love and loyalty. We do not like the thought that the contents of a book, this one, or the work of another alcoholic has accomplished in a few weeks that for which we struggled for years, meaning the wife struggling to get him right. At such moments, we forget that alcoholism is an illness, watch this, over which we could not possibly have had any power. But there is one that has all power. May you find him now. And that one is God, right? So watch this. We have none, but God has all power. So let's look at the next place. This is going to be interesting. Go to page 135. 135. Talking about the word cured. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Let's look at this. Let's look at the whole page. Whether the family goes on a spiritual basis or not, the alcoholic has to if he would recover. The others must be convinced of this new status beyond the shadow of a doubt. Seeing is believing to most families who have lived with a drinker. In other words, they don't want to hear a sermon, they want to see it, because faith without works is dead. Here is a case in point. Now, here's a story about a guy who was alcoholic. His wife got on him about drinking. He stopped drinking, but he got addicted to smoking and drinking coffee. Watch this. One of our friends is a heavy smoker and coffee drinker. There was no doubt he overindulged. Seeing this and meaning to be helpful, his wife commenced to admonish about him, get on his nerves, talk about him. He admitted he was overdoing these things, but frankly said that he was not ready to stop. His wife is one of those persons who really feels there is something rather sinful about these commodities, meaning his drinking coffee and smoking squares. She has nagged, and her intolerance finally threw him into a fit of anger. Remember, don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Look what happened to the man. And he relapsed. He got drunk. But let's keep looking. Of course, our friend was wrong, dead wrong, for allowing that to get to him. He had to painfully admit and mend his spiritual fences. Get back, because the most common thing to do when you fall down is to get up. Though he is now a most effective member of Alcoholics Anonymous, he still smokes and drinks coffee. But neither his wife nor anyone else stands in judgment. She sees she was wrong to make a burning issue, watch this, out of such a matter when his more serious ailments were being rapidly cured. What was his more serious ailment? His alcoholism. Wow. Okay. I'm showing this to the guy that was from Ohio, the mocker. And this is, I hear him, he's not even saying nothing. Now I showed him this. And I'm going to ask you a question on the conclusion. Can we kindly go to page, I don't even know if I want to do this to you, but let's look at what Dr. Bob said. Now, Dr. Bob, obviously, is the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And guess where he was from? Akron, Ohio. Look what he says. Now, look what chapter we're reading. Dr. Bob's Nightmare, page 180. First paragraph. That was June 10th, 1935, and that was my last drink. As I write, nearly 4 years have passed, so guess what? Bill stopped drinking. Now he picks up, it's 4 years now, he's writing this to us. The question which might naturally come into your mind would be, what did the man do or say that was different from what others had done or said? Now he's talking about Bill W. What did Bill say? It must be remembered that I had read a great deal, talking about Dr. Bob, and talked to everyone who knew or thought they knew anything about the subject of alcoholism. You got to remember, Dr. Bob was already a member of the Oxford group when Bill met him, because the big book tells us in the doctor's opinion. Watch this. Stay on this page. In the doctor's opinion, it tells us in the forward to the second edition, Roman numeral page XVI, last paragraph, The physician had repeatedly tried spiritual means to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but had failed. But when the broker, Bill W., gave him Dr. Silkworth's description of alcoholism and its hopelessness, the physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he never before been able to muster. He sobered, never to drink again up to the moment of his death in 1950. This proved that one alcoholic could affect another as no non-alcoholic could. These boys were serious. Look what they did. They weren't playing around. It also indicated that strenuous, one alcoholic with another was vital to permanent recovery. Now watch this. I'm going to come back to this because I'm going to show you what they did to the third guy. Go back to page 180. Let's look at what Dr. Bob continued to say. It must be remembered that I had read a great deal and talked to everyone who knew or thought they knew anything about the subject of alcoholism. But this was a man, Bill W., who had experienced many years of frightful drinking, who had had most all the drunkard experiences known to man, but who had been cured by the very means I had been trying to employ, that is to say, the spiritual approach. Because you remember, he was already in the Oxford group with Evie. He knew the solution, but he didn't know the problem and had a plan of action. He gave me information about the subject of alcoholism, we just read that, which was undoubtedly helpful. Of far more importance was the fact, notice it's in italicized, that he was the first living human with whom I had ever talked who knew what he was talking about in regards to alcoholism from actual experience. So Bill wasn't an entertainer, he was an educator. In other words, he talked my language. He knew all the answers, and certainly not because he had picked them up in reading. Bill had experienced something. It wasn't a theory for Bill no more. In other words, his wisdom protected him from the dangers of knowledge, because he said self-knowledge couldn't keep him clean. He experienced something. What did Bill experience? Bill had a spiritual awakening on page 14. All you got to do is look at the second paragraph. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, because it takes revolutionary and drastic proposals to recover from alcoholism. But the moment I fully accepted them, when did he accept them? ASAP, in the hospital. The effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. That's a spiritual awakening. Bill experienced that. It wasn't something you dig and you feel me. He know what he felt, right? Now, watch this. I'm going to show you something else. Now you see what Dr. Bob said. I'm talking about cured. Just asking a question. Now I'd like to draw your attention. Don't believe nothing I say. Let me draw your attention now to page 185. Page 185. You remember the big book when we were reading about Dr. Bob, Bill and them went to go see AA number 3. Matter of fact, go there real quick before we go to 185. Roman numeral page XVII. Notice what they say. Hence the two men, who are they, Bill and Bob? Men set to work almost frantically. What does that word mean? Your big book dictionary, guess what it says? It says highly excited, with strong emotion or frustration, desperate. They were moving, they weren't playing around. Frantically, upon alcoholics arriving in the ward of the Akron City Hospital. Their very first case, a desperate one. Wow. Recovered how soon? Recovered immediately and became AA number 3. He never had another drink. That's the guy you see in the hospital bed when you see the two guys standing with him and he's in the bed. That guy's Bill Dobson. Now we saw what Dr. Bob said, that Bill said. Let's look at what AA number 3 said. Then we're gonna look at what Bill said. Bottom of page 184. I was moved into another room, because you remember Dr. Bob called and said, put him in a room. And there was my wife. I thought to myself, well, she's going to tell me this is the end, and I certainly couldn't blame her and did not intend to try to justify myself. She told me that she had been talking to a couple of fellas. Who are those fellas? Bill and Bob. About drinking. I resented this very much until she informed me that they were a couple of drunks just as I was. That wasn't so bad to tell it to another drunk. Watch this. She said, you're going to quit. What gave her that confidence? Let's look. That was worth a lot, even though I did not believe it. Then she told me that these two drunks, Bill and Bob, she had been talking to, had a plan whereby they thought they could quit drinking. And part of that plan was that they tell it to another drunk. Wow, that's all? This was going to help them to stay sober. All of the other people who had talked to me wanted to help me, and my pride prevented me from listening to them and caused only resentment on my part. That was the AA number 3, but notice what he said. But I felt as if I would be a rather stinker if I did not listen to a couple of fellas for a short time, if that would cure them. My wife also told me that I could not pay them for even if I wanted to and had the money, which I did not. Why? Because there's no fees or dues. Watch this. They came in and began to give me instructions in the program that later became known as Alcoholics Anonymous. They didn't even have much. Watch. There was not much of it at the time. I looked up and there were two great big fellows over 6 foot tall. Very likable looking. I knew afterwards that the two who came in were Bill W. and Dr. Bob. Wow. That's AA number 3 telling us this, right? And what is he telling us? They had a cure. Now you see when the guy that called me from Ohio, now I got him on the phone, I'm talking to him. Then I told him, let's look at page 188. He proceeded to go, right? Let's look what else AA number 3 said. Let's look at that third or that second paragraph. At this point, the editors intrude just long enough to supplement Bill D's, Bill Dobson, third man in AA, account that of the man on the bed with that of Bill W., the man who sat by the side of the bed, says Bill W., 19 years ago last summer, Dr. Bob and I saw him for the first time. Bill lay on his hospital bed and looked at us in wonder. That's the third guy. Look at this. 2 days before this, Dr. Bob had said to me, if you and I are going to stay sober, we had better get busy, frantically, right? Straightway. Bob called Akron City Hospital, we just read that, and asked for the nurse on the receiving ward. He explained that he and a man from New York, Bill W., had a cure for alcoholism. Oh boy, let's keep looking. Let me draw your attention to page 191. Now I want to give you what Bill W. said. You saw what Dr. Bob said, a cure. AA number 3, a cure. Dr. Bob just said it again, a cure for alcoholism. Watch this. Look at what Bill W. said. Because remember what happened to him in that room? Look what he said. Page 191, first paragraph, first and second. It would be hard to estimate how much AA has done for me. I really wanted the program and I wanted to go along with it. This is Bill Dobson talking. I noticed that the others seemed to have such a release of happiness and something that I thought a person ought to have. I was trying to find the answer. I knew there was even more, something that I hadn't got, and I remember one day, a week or two after I had come out of the hospital, Bill who W, was at my house talking to my wife and me. Watch this. We were eating lunch and I was listening and trying to find out why they had this release that they seemed to have. Bill W. looked across at my wife and said to her, AA number 3's wife, Henrietta, the Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease that I just want to keep talking about it and telling people. Good Lord. I think I have the answer. Bill W. was very, very grateful that he had been released from this terrible thing, and he had given God, the one with all power, not the fellowship, not the program, the credit for having done it. Done what? Cured him. And he's so grateful about it, he wants to tell other people about it. Tell them what? The sentence, that sentence. The Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease, that I just want to keep telling people about it. Watch this. Has been a sort of a golden text for the AA programming for me. I wonder if Bill and Bob were alive right now, would they be displeased with us because we tell people that they never recover? You're going to be doing it forever. And guess what? You better not say that. The Lord has cured you. You know what? I had my friend on the phone, and I asked him a question, and I took him to page 25 of the big book. I got 2 more places to take you. I took him to page 25, and I showed him this. Let me get there first. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leaven of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. In other words, only the process is going to produce the result. What is the result? A spiritual awakening, which is the solution. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, cured, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence on which we have not even dreamed. Let me read something to you what the Big Book Dictionary calls the 4th dimension. Something outside the range of ordinary experience. That's supernatural. That's God putting some super on your natural. A dimension in addition to the 3 rectangular dimensions of length, breadth, and depth, which is often considered to be time. In other words, God doesn't live in time, he lives in eternity. We live in time, so that's why we try to count clean time. But guess what? Where God is always clean. So the minute I get in God, I get it right there, right? Because the power is always on. It's never off. Watch this. The great fact is just this and nothing less. That we have had, past tense, deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, towards our fellows, and toward God's universe. The essential facts of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could not do by ourselves. You remember the lady said they had no power, but there's one with all, and I believe he can cure me. If you are seriously alcoholic as we're no longer. That's what I want. I was getting to my friend. We believe there's no middle of the road solution. Here are the 2 solutions. We're in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, not God's, because God could and would if he was sought, but he can't and he ain't if you don't. We have but 2 alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. That sounds like denial. And I'm not talking about a river in Egypt. I'm talking about the inability to accept your reality. What's your reality? You're not God. That's self-will. God's will is there is a God. Watch this. As best we could, and the other, to accept spiritual help. So, what I'd like to conclude with, Bernie Mac pretty much says it best. He used to say, who you with? Well, let me find out who you with, and then I'll conclude, because I know the mind can only hold as much as the rear end can endure. So here comes the question I let my friend see. Page 53, second paragraph. When we become alcoholics, hold it, I don't want to go there. Yeah, I do. Yeah. When we become alcoholic, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he's nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was your choice to be? I remember Joshua said, for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And guess what? I'm going to continue to repeat the sentiments of what Bill W. said. And I know it's probably gassing a few of you, but we believe the big book. It's our basic text. The Lord has been, page 191, last sentence. The Lord has been wonderful to Abraham, curing me of this terrible disease that I just want to keep telling people about it. Has been sort of a golden text for me to tell you that we do recover. When I showed my friend that, he said, will you sponsor me? I said, only if you embrace this one statement I'm about to make to you. And here is the statement that I shared with him. We will never have to relive the horrors of the past if we remain in the presence of God. I asked him, did he believe that? He said, would you be my sponsor? I said, you know what? Helping others is the foundation stone of our recovery. Absolutely, I would. And that was my conversation with a 73-year-old man that had 51 years. He told me I changed his whole outlook on what he thought about recovery. Look, if this made any sense to you, leave me a comment. Let's be civil. We can discuss and sometimes debate. I don't like the debate, but I just showed you what the people showed me. Here's the question. How big is your God? Mine can do all things. All things are possible to him that believe. I'll talk to you soon. May God continue to increase you and your family more and more. Bye.